Thank you, thank you. So I'm very happy to be able to share some of the experience with you. And I was tasked with the title that you can see there, what it takes to implement the Adizes transformation program, and a subtitle from a change agent perspective. So part of the information that I would like to share is something that summarizes some knowledge base that we have been working on. And part of it is my own experience, which I don't mean to present as final. And of course is just my own personal reflections that I would like to share with you. First of all, actually, I would like to start by thanking the people that I have learned the most in this space. We're going to be focusing a lot in the change agent perspective. And of course, starting with Dr. Adizes, whom I didn't know was going to be here, and now I'm nervous. But the rest of the group are the guys that are constantly teaching integrators. And it's always great to get some feedback from them. And we have very interesting discussions. And that's from where this information is partially coming from. So one of the things that I wanted to include here is, first of all, what I would like to talk about today. First, why companies look for transformation. When I was given the title, I was wondering, why do companies come to Adizes? What's the main reason? And we actually have a process where we document and we ask our colleagues at the offices, why is this company trying to work with Adizes? Why are they coming to us? What are the key elements for a transformation? Then considerations to have a successful Adizes program implementation. And finally, the role of the internal change agent in the Adizes program, and some questions if you have some questions for me. So first of all, I would like to share that back in 2018, before the pandemic, we started collecting in a more formal way in a space that we call the central repository. We started collecting information about the different Adizes projects around the world. And as most Adizes associates know, or all Adizes associates know, and some of you who are not know as well, there's a process where we get a SYNDAC certificate, right? Every time we do a SYNDAC and some specific phases, we have a certificate and we start collecting those different projects. So far, it was created in 2018. So far, it holds more than 300 Adizes transformation projects, information that we collect with the help of the different colleagues, categorized in 14 different industries. That's how we organize them. And it has projects in more than 30 different countries. That's so far what we have collected. And one key important thing is that the information is accessible for the associates that might need it in an anonymous way. So we never share the name of the company. We share the location. We share the relevant information of the project to do some research or to actually look for some references, but we never share the name of the company. So after doing that, after having this information, and actually some of you have already reached out to the professional directors to get some relevant information, what I decided to do was to put some of the information into the Gemini AI and ask it to give me some information back about the central repository. And it gave me this map of locations. So it pulled a sample of different projects and it gave me a map of these different locations. Of course, statistically, it's where we have the most number of projects, right? So that's how the countries came to pass. Some percentages, they map in percentages of the number of projects. So that gives us an idea about which parts are more active and where we may be a little bit less active. And the other thing that actually came up out of this is, where are these companies when they do the first SYNDAC into the life cycle? Where are they? where do you think you're gonna get the most number of companies?
Both.
My people know it, so that's great. So when you see the dot, when you see the dot in the middle, that's a transition. When you see it next to the name, it means it's mostly there, right? And please realize that we had to categorize them to do this exercise because typically there are some transitions, they have small traits of other locations, but the purpose was to get some interesting information out of this exercise. And this is the actual outcome of.
Wow.
No, these are numbers, number of syntax. Number of syntax. We only have 3 there. So
I can add.
it could be if in my experience, if I may share just a quick note to that, I typically feel that when the company classifies themselves, and part of the exercise that we do is that they share where do they believe, and when they tell you they are in prime, is most likely the first sign that they are not in prime. You have to be told you are in prime. That's my experience. What else? So as part of what we collect when we do the syntax, there's something that we call the client intake form, and that's where our associates input information why the company would like to work with us. That's part of the documentation. And also using the AI, I got some patterns out of the information and different reasons and groupings. Grouping number 1 is growing pains, which would be under 2 categories, rapid growth and some structural challenges. Reason number 2 or group number 2 is leadership and management. Inability to delegate, leadership transitions from founder-led to professionally managed organizations. That was another grouping. The third one is strategic planning, clear direction to the future, get common goals into the organization. The fourth one, as a main grouping, was integration and culture, improving communications, integrating different departments and teams. And then we got one last one, which is other reasons, right? And those other reasons were there are companies that said, I would like to do the syntax, specifically what Virginius was saying, to get a general assessment of the health of my organization. I just want to know. Like we say in Spanish, I'm paying to see. Just to see what's coming out of this. We'll talk about it later. And then the last one is innovation and profitability challenges. That was I think was the last grouping. Yes, yeah.
Do you have them also ranked in terms of what will be like the top 2 or 3 things?
Yeah, so they're here categorized in ranks. So growing pains is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. So these are the reasons. This was just general information to put into context. But let's also take into account that I was asked to include, and eventually it will merge into the role of the change agent, right? Which can be an Adizes associate, and in other organizations is someone who works at the actual organization. From my experience, what are the building blocks that I believe are key to a successful transformation program? And here comes something that Dr. Adizes said yesterday. So I think it was the day before yesterday, he was sharing with us and he said, common sense, guys, common sense. And in Spanish, we say that common sense is the less common of the senses. That's a typical saying in Spanish. And maybe many of these things will be like, duh, thank you for telling me what you really know. But the purpose is to try to go back to the basics and think about, because also with enough experience, I have seen some of the projects fail for any of these reasons, actually. So number 1 is the CEO's commitment. I think that's pretty obvious, but we have fallen into the trap of the CEO saying, yeah, you go and implement it and I'll be part of it, but not fully involved. It fails, right? So that's one of the key things. What else? A good understanding of the energy and effort required. Some organizations go into the Adizes process thinking that it's going to be the typical consulting. Right. Now we're going to go analyze, do a lot of work, a lot of numbers, big papers, and then deliver them a report. And they don't realize that they actually will have to invest a lot of time into the project because they are the experts. They are the ones, we're just guiding them through the process, but they are the ones that need to get their hands into the project. So it's important for the organization to understand that requirement, the amount of energy and effort that they will have to put. On top of that, at least in my experience, there's a very important role, a committed internal key partner or champion. That's where the internal change agent comes in. It typically starts, and I'll talk about it, but it typically starts with the person who is actually our connection inside the organization. This is someone that maybe is helping us organize the SINDAC. This is someone that maybe is helping us getting the right people into the room. But that person, if we actually embrace them as a partner, that's key to the success of the program. And I'll go a little bit deeper into that specific point. What else? Another important thing, constant communication of events and progress to the rest of the organization. I think that, and maybe I might be mistaken, but I think that at Adizes we're not very good at this when we implement the program. So how do we let know the rest of the organization that things are moving? And with a very simple example that I would like to give, recently we did a SINDAC for a organization in North Carolina, and they have a production plan, and they were wondering, how do we get the workers that were into the SINDAC know that things are moving? Very simple, newsletter every month into a plant. They know which senior teams are working, what's the progress, what's going on, pictures, 2 lines of information, that's it. But getting out that information and letting know the organization, things are changing. Because they might see it, they might feel it, but if they read about it or they get information on what's going on, that's going to help us a lot in the success of the program. And then the last thing is adapting to the internal IT resources available to the organization. I believe that every Adizes associate at this point should be an expert in Zoom, in Teams, in Google Meet, in SAP, in Miro, in Asana, all the tools. You have to be able to adapt to whatever IT tool the company is using. We can no longer come with a third-party solution and say, hey, why don't you implement this? Because that would be a software number 55 for them to use. They will never find the password. They will never access the tool. They will never use it. So we need to find a way to actually start using the tools that they use inside the organization. Yes, Dr. Adizes.
I think we are missing the most people below CEO committee, before CEO committee. CEO trust. That he trusts is the established trust. Because you see, it's very scary what we do, guys. Think about it. It's very, very scary.
Yeah.
Telling there are all the top management and sometimes even the trade union, because you need copy, in a local room to discuss. He says, are you crazy? What the hell are you talking about? You're going to destroy my company. He has to trust that you're capable of delivering a sympathy without destroying the company.
Absolutely agree, Dr. Adizes. I think we can add that line. And my beautiful assistant / wife is taking notes. So this is where I'm going to get in trouble, because the way I explain, I always include the 11 phases and everything that we have in the process, but I explain it in 3 main parts and then later on to the higher phases. But this is how I go about it, answering your question, Eduardo, and this is probably the decertification process coming. But I explain it in 3 pieces, and then I talk about the rest of the pieces. But the first is, people are very familiar with the change management word, and this is where I include or first 3 phases. And I tell them, this is change management. You do a diagnosis, you establish your POC, and then you run senior teams to solve those problems. And this thing keeps going, endless. That's your change management function. That's what you establish. The next thing is what I explain as, I'm not saying it's the official language, it's the way I found an easy way to explaining. It's strategic alignment, which comes with the senior scope, the organizational design, or what we call the synergetic organizational design, and the CMORDES, exactly, and the accountability systems. That is strategic alignment in the language that I use to explain it to someone who's learning Adizes. Then I talk about the cascading. And this is where I feel that many organizations might not be using the full power of the methodology because we stop at a certain level. And it is more logical with some organizations that have successfully done it. And I think that we have Grupo Salinas as a good example of doing the cascading. But for some reason, we believe that when the organization is smaller or doesn't have divisions, we cannot go down the road into cascading. And I believe it's an important key. This is where the internal change agents or the internal integrators, come into place, as well as doing cascaded diagnosis into the organizations, and then also the sub-POCs and senior teams that come out of that process. And I think that at least in the experience that in the projects that I have been part of with the companies that I have been working with, to me, it's key to maintain the methodology there because I have now, with my 13 short years of experience working with Adizes, I have seen companies that they work with us 2-3 years, then they say we're ready to go solo, and then 5 years later they come back and they say, hey, we would like to reactivate, and they have a POC, they have senior teams, they have all these things running thanks to the internal integrators or the internal change agents. So they are the ones that are actually keeping the methodology alive, and even in some cases where those integrators have left the organization, the company is just used to it and they keep doing the POCs, doing the senior teams the best they can, and then eventually they call us back and they say, hey, we would like to reconnect, we would like to re-engage, give us a little bit more energy and let us fly solo again. And that's why this piece is very, very, very important. And I believe that not all of the projects that we get involved, we don't proactively always do it. So let me keep going. A good internal change agent. These are the characteristics that I got from my experience talking to colleagues, talking to people like Virginius, Shoham, Greg, Sunil, these great associates that I have learned from. And the first one is, the person is identified as a high potential individual. You want to look for those people that you want to develop. You don't want someone who's going to be the internal change agent or integrator forever. You want someone that is it's actually a great opportunity to develop someone. Because you get them exposed, you move them around the organization, they get known around the organization, they learn about different departments, different areas, different conflicts, and that's a development process. Someone who's unafraid of conflict. I've seen also this mistake, people who are very, they have a bad eye, I would even call it, like feeling afraid of conflict. Availability to perform the role as integrator. I've also seen this case where they appoint someone who's very good, but they don't release them to actually perform the role, and they cannot do it properly because they don't have the time or they end up being overburdened. All right, what else? Strong interpersonal skills and leadership abilities. That is another characteristic. Frustration tolerance. The result might not be dependent on you. It depends on the team. So you need to have that level. Be able to command and grant respect and trust. have some level of seniority. I have also seen trying to get someone who's new to the company, a recently graduated person, into becoming the integrator for the company. Mistake. Doesn't work. Ability to synthesize information as well, effective communicator, and has a commanding presence. So I actually ran a quick survey with the group, a WhatsApp survey poll. And I also asked Dr. Adizes, and we got to pretty similar conclusions on, in terms of PAI, what is more important for an integrator? And I is the obvious answer number one, right? But then if you scale it down, it came to this conclusion. And my understanding, I'm not saying it's final, but my understanding is the following. The most important is very clear, right? I personally believe that you can be an integrator as long as you have a good level of I. The next letter can be different. I mean, it's in the end is a role, but my understanding is A becomes next because you have a process, and we have always said, believe in the process, follow the process. The process will take you to the result, and there you go. However, sometimes you have to be dancing, as Johan was saying. You have to be creative. You have to come up with new ideas. P seems to be the less important, I would say, in specific companies. Sometimes, and this is also my experience, and I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but sometimes I think that the integrators fall into the trap of becoming babysitters.
Because the CEO pushes them.
And they are actually end up doing everything, and the P gets higher. But the integrator should not be worried about the P. Who should be worried about the P? The implementers. Exactly. All right. So I'm about to be done, I think. So what are the key activities, in my experience, again, I'm saying it's final, that a internal change agent should do in order to be successful? Number one is, of course, getting that person involved, that key partner that I was talking about at the beginning, getting that person involved into the planning of the SYNDAC. Hopefully, having that person become the administrator of the main POC. That's another one. Proactively participate in senior core meetings. I think that we all make the mistake of having the senior core with the implementer, and we make aside the administrator when he or she should be part of those key conversations. Shadows the Adizes associate in senior team, as many senior teams as possible, getting the mileage, participating in as many senior teams as possible, with the Adizes associate, without the Adizes associate, just be part of it and getting those 10,000 hours to become very good at it. Gets involved in the planning process and organization of the following phases. If we're doing phase 4, phase 5, this person should also be part of those discussions and be part of the CAPI group. And I marked these two in red. For them to be successful, their direct supervisor need to fully support. If they don't get that support from that direct supervisor, it's not going to work. Regardless of the CEO saying, yes, this person is the good one, let's go. If the direct supervisor is not the CEO, someone else, and that person is not fully supporting him or her, will be in trouble. And the last one is also begins leading transformation at new levels of the organization, which is a cascading. That's where they can actually start becoming more active and take the lead role. I had two hands, Jorge, and then Barbara.
What is your recommendation of when to choose that person? Before the SYNDAC, because I see getting involved in planning the SYNDAC, we usually choose an administrator to do that. But later on, a few months later, we know better the people, and then we suggest a few of them to become in-company change leaders. So what's the time you suggest to pick that person?
In my experience, if possible, get them involved even before the SYNDAC. Don't start identifying that person even before the syntax.
But how do you?
No, it's. I mean, you start by asking, giving the characteristics of what you're looking for to the CEO and maybe some additional persons of the top managers that are part of the entire conversation. You get a list of people and you interview them. Because another important thing that we do when we are bringing people, I know this happens in Mexico. I'm not sure if it's happening in other places, but I'm certain that it happens in Mexico, is that we interview the people that are going to come to the integrators training, that are coming from companies that we're working with. We interview them and we do a full interview and we ask them, because that's another important thing. Would you like to perform this role? And I have had some people telling me, no. I'm here because they sent me, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Why do we waste our time? So we identify the people. My experience and recommendation would be try to identify. Maybe you change later, but sometimes you actually end up identifying the right person. Okay, so I'm about to finish so that you don't fall asleep. So I wanted to finish with an example of the cascading, which you might be familiar with. But for those who are not, it basically means opening lower level POCs into the organization, cascading down the organization. And it can be, this is a good example of a company, they have a North America POC and they have a human factors POC and they have senior teams running at that level, but also running at the top level. How POCs can be configured, this has been also a long debate, but I have come to the conclusion that I have already shown Dr. Adizes. Maybe he has forgotten about it, but I have shown it. And there's 5. A division-oriented POC. That's when you have different divisions in the grouping. An area/department-oriented. A subsystem-oriented. A corporate goal-oriented, or maybe a mix of the. We have successfully run sub-POCs focused on a corporate goal. And that's the time that the POC will remain. And one of the examples that I would like to put here, and I selected this example because it was it has been recently, and I would like to share it also to use it as a congratulation to some of our colleagues. There is this company called Complex. Don't worry about the video. The video is intended to be on mute. But as an example, we have this company called Complex in Monterrey, Mexico. They were founded in 1989, and they have been with us since 2013. They have trained more than 20 internal integrators. They were Company of the Year in 2018, and they have been running a cascaded POC for more than 100 sessions. So they have accomplished 100 sessions or more, and I would like to actually recognize our colleague from Monterrey, Jacinto Juarez, who has been running this client for a long time. I can proudly say that Adizes has really embedded into this organization. They use it for everything. They look for Jacinto's advice every time there's an opportunity or a problem or an upward threat in the organization, and also of course other people that have worked here in the past, Miguel, Humberto, Richard, have been part of this project, and it's an example that if we do it properly and if we go, the company doesn't need to be 10,000 employees. You can have a smaller company running successfully and cascading into the organization a successful Adizes program. Yeah. So I'm running out of time. So just to conclude, reacting very quickly to two things. Absolutely agree with you, Dr. Adizes. If you build it down, someone from the outside, we've been in that situation recently with a company. They switched CEOs. The new guy came in, tried to destroy everything. He couldn't because it was already part of the DNA of the company and they couldn't do it. The maximum number of POCs, I think that's debatable. I think we should be very careful with that because that can actually overburden the system into the company. So as Seki was saying, we need to be careful. All right. Sorry, guys, that is taking a little bit longer, but just 3 quick conclusions. Conclusion number 1, to summarize, the successful implementation of the Adizes transformation program requires energy and commitment from the organization at different levels and points. The internal change agent is a key partner in the success, and we need to make sure that we have that person. And then finally, when possible and at the right time, cascade the transformation to enhance the result, because that's where you find more energy for change once you have run out of the first batch of energy for change. And that's it. Thank you very much.